Hello, my name is Sigmund Freud, and once again your instructor Pat Johnson can't be here. So she asked me to come and talk about a very important part of my theory, the structure of the mind. We're going to be focusing on the id, the ego, and the superego. Now many of you have heard of these terms. They still are part of everyday language, even though I died many years ago. Recall this picture. It is my depiction of the personality, the structure of the mind, as an iceberg floating in a sea with 3 levels of consciousness. So here above the surface is the conscious, right below the surface is the pre-conscious, and then buried deep beneath is the unconscious, the most important part of your personality. The 3 structures, as I said, are the id, the ego, and the superego. And here, buried deep beneath the surface in the unconscious is the id. So let's start with the id. The id is a very important part of your mind. It is all that unconscious psychic energy that, according to me, Freud, strives to satisfy basic sexual and aggressive drives. So these are the two most important drives are sexual and aggressive urges. The id, this part of your personality, operates on the pleasure principle. It is always seeking pleasure immediately, so it demands immediate gratification. If you are thirsty, your id would say, I want to drink now. If you are angry, your id would say, take your aggression out on somebody who angers you, beat them up. If you are feeling frisky, your id would say, woohoo, right here, right now. The id wants immediate gratification. The next part of your personality, part of your mind, is the superego. And this part of your personality represents your conscience. In other words, your internalized ideals. They provide standards for judgment and future goals. So the superego, spanning all 3 levels of conscious, pre-conscious, and unconscious, lives by the moral principle. And the moral principle says, do what's right. In other words, satisfy all that is in your conscience, all those shoulds and those shouldn'ts. As you can imagine, somebody would have quite the stress between their superego and their id. There would always be a war going on. Should I have immediate gratification of all my drives and urges, or should I be doing what's right, doing what my conscience says? And so this is the job of the ego. The ego, which is largely conscious, balances the demands of the id, the superego, and reality. So the ego operates on the reality principle. So if you are feeling hungry, the ego would say, yes, you can have something to eat, but it should be healthy. It should be nutritious for you, which would be the demands of the superego. So it seeks pleasure rather than pain, but it seeks to satisfy those rules of society while also fulfilling the basic demands. So here you can see inside your personality, there is the id, which lives by the pleasure principle, always wanting to be satisfied. And then on the right is the superego, which has the halo, trying to do what's right, live by the moral principle. And here's your ego caught between, trying to satisfy both the drives of the id and the demands of the superego.